Hi, everybody. This is Rob Packard from Medical Device Academy. Today's presentation is a webinar on special 510Ks. For anybody that's not able to participate, this webinar is being recorded. And at the end of the presentation, there is a link for you to schedule a private session with me if you want to ask specific questions that are proprietary to your company. You can also shoot me questions by email or give me a call. All my contact information is on the last slide. Also, throughout the presentation, there are some hyperlinks in the different slides. So if you're interested in getting that information, I've also emailed you the native slide deck. You're welcome to reuse that information for training internally if you wish, and use those hyperlinks to help gather some of the information that might be helpful to you. If you have any questions during the presentation, make a note. You can submit it directly into the chat session. I'm going to answer everybody's questions that they submitted ahead of time at the end of the session, and then there'll be live Q&A. So I'll go through the chat box questions, and then afterwards we can follow up in person or follow up by virtually through Zoom to answer any of your specific questions for your device. Here's the agenda for the presentation. I won't go through this in detail because it's a fairly short presentation. It probably will run over about an hour though. So but don't worry, if you miss some of the end, there'll still be the recording and everybody will be able to receive that. Okay, so number one, guidance documents. The two key documents for you to be concerned about when you're talking about special 510Ks is the software modifications guidance document and the general device modifications guidance document. A lot of people are familiar with the K97-1 guidance document, which was very old. They tried to replace it several times, and they finally made a final draft, and it was approved in October of last year. So that is the current guidance document telling you if you're making a device modification to a device that already has a 510K, whether you need to submit a new 510K or not. That's the guidance. And they created this other one specific to software. So those are two key guidance documents that you should be downloading. Other somewhat relevant guidance documents would be the user fee and refunds, because sometimes you want to know how much does it cost to submit a 510K or a special 510K because I haven't submitted one in a long time, or if we submit one and it's refused to accept because we don't have some of the testing we need. What about getting a refund? Some people want to know what the review timelines are and what the FDA's goals are for with regard to hitting those timelines. There's also an email about how to respond to deficiencies. So when the FDA gives you an RTA checklist and says you're on RTA hold, or they identify requests for additional information, how do you respond to that? And then last but not least, there's an RTA guidance. And even though it's 86 pages long, the first 17 pages are the guts of the guidance. And then there are 3 sections at the end that are forms. So I actually used Adobe Acrobat and broke them up into different documents. So I have a checklist for traditional, abbreviated, and special as separate documents. And then I have the guidance as the 17-page guidance, just to make it a little more easy for me to thumb through it quickly. But as you can see, the special guidance document checklist is much, much shorter. It's only 10 pages. And I'm going to explain why as we go through this. So what makes a special 510K? What makes it special? Why do they use that term? First of all, special 510Ks are shorter. Instead of a 90-day review, which is what the FDA's goal is for traditional 510Ks, it's only 30 days. And in order to get their entire review done and make a decision on whether your device is substantially equivalent in 30 days, there are some requirements. Number one, and this is the most important thing, you have to be the owner of a previous 510K, and that is the predicate for this new submission, and you're making a minor modification to that submission. So that's what the definition of a special 510K is. So if you don't have a previous 510K, just because it's similar to somebody else's doesn't mean you can use this route. And if you're not going to use your device as the predicate, also can't do this. And if you're making major modifications or significant modifications to your device, whatever name you want to do to describe them, those aren't going to be applicable either. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about the difference of major and minor, and I'll give you some really good tools to help you explain that, because the best is looking at real examples. Another requirement is you can't change your indications for use in any way. And the FDA in one place says indications, another place says intended use. They didn't make this 100% clear in the new guidance document that they released, but in general, the FDA has gotten much tougher on changes to indications. And essentially, the intended use, yes, that's broader, but the indications for use also really can't change. That's also with regard to substantial equivalence. If you're making a significant change to the indications in any way, the FDA is likely to require more clinical data and make it very tough for you to even claim substantial equivalence, let alone use a special 510K route. Another thing that is required for special 510Ks is you can't change your scientific technology. So if your old device was using RF technology and your new device is using ultrasound technology, this isn't going to work. When you change the technology, even though the indication is the same, the new technology introduces new risks, and even though you could validate that it's safe and efficacious, that's not going to be a special 510K route. That's going to be a traditional 510K route or a completely new device classification. And then last but not least, part of the reason why the FDA can review these in 30 days is because you do a really good job of summarizing the information instead of forcing them to read a long report. A long report for, let's say, electrical safety, if you had to redo some electrical safety testing, that could be a 30-page test report that they have to read through. On average, we see special 510K submissions are like 100 to 150 pages, maybe 200 pages. If you have a bunch of test reports in there, they just can't get through it that quick. So one of the things they're looking for is you summarized the information for your testing. So for instance, we redid this verification test using the same method, the same acceptance criteria, and got the same results. That's the kind of summary they want. You need to be a little bit more specific than that, but a half a page summary explaining what the test method was, what the acceptance criteria was, the number of samples, that's what they're looking for. So, changes to the timeline. On the left, you see the standard timeline for a 510K. On the right, you see two arrows indicating where the changes are. The changes are not in the beginning of the process, but at the end. The substantive review, instead of being a 45-day process to take you from day 15 to day 60, it's now a 15-day process. So the actual time that the lead reviewer is going to be looking at your submission is only 15 days. Somebody else is probably going to be looking at it for the RTA screening. Though sometimes the lead reviewer will also be the RTA screener. Then you also have the final decision, and the total time from day one to the decision has to be 30 days. That's their goal. And if they don't hit that goal, they don't have some sort of a, if you don't do it by this date, you have to fill out this form for a special. But in general, it's quite challenging for the FDA to try to complete this, and they do their best. But 30 days is a very short timeline for them to go through all the paperwork. So how is the FDA doing on that timeline? A lot of people wonder, like, well, how likely is it that they'll actually complete their review in 30 days? And the answer is 53% of the time they get it done in 30 days. But as you can see, based on this graph of fiscal year 2015 and 2016 data, we've got most of the submissions are pretty tight around the 30 days, but then we have sort of another peak right here, and it's not really a peak, but a broad sort of curve of data here where we have some people going out to 90 days. So this is another 60 days that it took them to respond and make the decision. So probably what happened is the company received a request for additional information somewhere just before the 30-day mark, and the company had to think about the response, maybe do some additional testing, and then respond, and then the FDA had to review that new testing. And therefore, it took 90 days. So that's not all that uncommon. Sometimes the company provides a justification. Sometimes the company has to reformat some of the submission, but that's the reason why these submissions are out here and weren't completed within the 30 days. But the FDA stops the clock when they send that deficiency list or the RTA checklist saying it's being put on hold. And so I included those hold days in my calculations. but the FDA doesn't. So the FDA says they still finish it in 30 days, but in reality, in calendar days that we experience, it was quite a bit longer for some of these companies. For traditional 510K, you have a completely different scale. So in the previous slide, my columns here are 1 week, whereas in this slide, my columns are 1 month. So even though this is on the same scale for the slide, this is a much longer time period. It goes out to 660 days. So yes, some companies were so unfortunate that it was over 600 days to get their 510K cleared. And here we see a big spike where people are taking 180 days from the normal. So it goes out to 270 days. They took the full 180 days from an RTA hold to redo some testing and resubmit. So that's why we have the second spike here. And then there are people that are submitting justifications and tests and answering questions. So we have this, and then it just continues to taper off until you have a few people way out here. But this is very rare. Much more common is to be in this range. And the average, in fact, is right about here, I believe, about 125, 130 days. Okay, another thing you need to know about 510K submissions that are specials is that the FDA won't allow you to make a bunch of changes to a bunch of functional areas. They only have 30 days to review it, and only 15 of those are for the substantial review. And if they had to consult multiple departments in the Office of Device Evaluations, they just couldn't coordinate all the work and make their decision in 30 days. So therefore, even though they might be minor modifications, if you make a modification to the sterilization process and the biocompatibility at the same time in the same submission, they just don't have the resources to coordinate all that and get it done within 30 days. So they say, sorry, we're going to have to convert this to a traditional submission. Same thing is true for mechanical changes. If you make a change to materials that affects both biocompatibility and mechanical, that's two different functional areas. If it were only affecting biocompatibility and not mechanical, that would be one thing, or vice versa. But if it affects both, they just don't have the time and resources to do it. So what happens when you can get converted from a special to a traditional? So what's happened is you submitted it as a special 510K, hoping to get an answer in 30 days. And the FDA says, sorry, no dice. You're going to have to do a traditional submission. Most of the time, they determine that in the first 4 questions of their RTA checklist, and they spit it back to you saying, sorry, this is not a special 510K. This will be a traditional 510K. And when that happens, they switch checklists. They go over to the longer form for a traditional 510K, and they start answering the questions. And because you've designed your submission for a special 510K, you don't meet the requirements of a special 510K, a traditional 510K, and you get an RTA hold letter. If they don't make that decision right away and they wait until after 15 days to say, this really belongs as a traditional submission, then they're going to give you the deficiency list as a request for additional information, and the clock stops, but it doesn't go back to 0. So when you get an RTA hold letter, you restart your clock and you resubmit. That's also an opportunity to get a refund if you change your mind. But if your deficiency or additional information comes during the substantive review, now the clock stops, but it doesn't go back to 0. You might be at day 45 or something, and now you have to provide that information, and you're now more on the traditional track. So the value of a pre-sub meeting. This was actually asked in one of the questions from people. People were saying, what is the value in doing a pre-sub? People had asked, how can we determine if we're eligible for a 510K that would be special type? One of the best ways to determine that is submit a pre-sub and ask the question. You can confirm during a pre-sub meeting what type of 510K submission you can do, and they can say yes or no to a special type submission. And if you're not eligible for a special type, they'll tell you why. Another thing that happens during the pre-sub meetings is it's not just the lead reviewer that's present, but usually the branch chief is also present. So this is an opportunity for those 2 people to review the basis for your change and the preliminary information that you have. So even though they only have 30 days for the review of your submission, if they've already seen it as part of a pre-sub, they may be more familiar with it and things might go a little faster for them, so they're more likely to be able to complete it within that 30 days. They also can see what areas are going to be a problem and give you a little attention to, hey, this is the part of the submission that's most important for us to have very clear, and this is what we're looking for in the special submission. You're also less likely to have missing information. So most of the decisions are around 30 days, but some people take longer because they were missing some testing data or some information the FDA wanted. You're less likely to be missing that if you have a pre-sub, because you're going to submit your testing plan and ask questions about it. And then you'll also learn if there have been any updates to standards or guidance documents that aren't published, they're in draft, or you just weren't aware of. So pre-subs are a great way to learn, oh, we're just about ready to publish this new guidance document, so you should be aware of it and do your testing to that new guidance. Here, we'll email you a copy of it. So that could be a follow-up action for the FDA from your pre-sub. But if you're interested in more about pre-subs, I actually have a link down there. You can register for my free webinar that I did on pre-subs, and it's actually already recorded, so you can download that. Special 510K or letter to file. So a lot of times people are trying to decide, should this submission be a special 510K or should it be a letter to file? And so the top 3 reasons are the benefits for why you would do a 510K. And the bottom red reasons are the reasons why people most of the time don't want to do a 510K, even a special 510K, and why they would prefer to do a letter to file. So if you don't do a 510K and you do a letter to file, and you continue to do this multiple times, and the FDA doesn't agree with what you found, number 1 possibility is you get a 483. Number 2 possibility is you get a warning letter saying that you need to submit a 510K. And oftentimes the company will be given some leniency and they won't have to pull the product off the market, but they're given a very short leash and expected to submit a 510K right away. And so you want to avoid that scenario, particularly if you're a foreign company, because if you get 2 warning letters, then you're put on import detention and can't ship anything into the US until it's resolved. Another reason is you don't want to have a catch-up 510K. If you continually, every time you make minor modifications, you submit a special 510K, then you're not going to have to do a catch-up 510K later on. I know one client that had to do a catch-up 510K after 40 years of changes. Really tough situation to be in because some of the documentation was very old and it was very hard to show how the current device was similar to the original device, even though it was very similar to the last change they made. Each change was a minor modification, but after 40 years of doing that, your original device is so different from where you are today that you need a catch-up. And really, you should be doing catch-ups every so many years because all these little minor modifications add up pretty quickly. You also would be able to keep your 510K documentation current. I see companies that are 5, 6, 7 years old on their 510K. They have a lot of trouble updating it. They don't understand why their 510K that they submitted, they can't use any of that documentation because it doesn't meet any of the current guidance requirements. But when you're submitting a special 510K every year, then you have a very easy time of keeping up your documentation to the current requirements for a submission. So I highly recommend using the special 510Ks for minor modifications. And yes, the bottom of the slide shows you how much it's going to cost. But if you have a delay to market for a new modification you're making, that could cost you tens of thousands of dollars. It could cost you your position in the marketplace. Whereas if you're doing special 510Ks, those are really quick decisions and you could avoid having any losses competitively just because you weren't able to launch when you wanted to for a critical trade show or something. So what are the differences in the RTA checklist? As I said, it's the shorter form, 10 pages versus 31 pages for the traditional. And they ask 23 questions for the lead reviewer to answer or the screener to answer versus 52 questions. So it takes a lot less time to fill out these RTA checklists. The preliminary screening questions are different. They're the preliminary screening questions for a traditional are just trying to determine whether it's eligible for a 510K at all, whereas the questions for a special 510K really just focus on whether you have an existing 510K and you've only made minor modifications and no changes to the indications. The question 7 is completely eliminated in a special 510K because you can't submit new clinical data. If you need to submit new clinical data, that would be typically for an indication for use change, expanded indications, or major modifications. So no new clinical data. So they eliminate that question. Question 17 about design controls is an addition. So if you've ever seen a statement declaring conformity to design controls, that's intended for a special 510K. You're not required to submit that for a traditional 510K. So you should have a form letter set up just for that. I actually don't have a form for that because I've never had anybody ask me to do a special 510K. Most companies that have done 510Ks before just copy their old material, submit a special 510K, and then they find out, oh, we didn't read the directions very well, and they run into problems. So those are some of the people that are beyond 30 days. But if you need help with a special 510K, we're more than happy to help, and that'll give me the excuse to create a template, and I won't charge you for the template. And then I'll be able to make it available to other people as well. But it's a fairly short requirement. They have 3 things that they're looking for, and I'll cover that in a subsequent slide here. The labeling section is abbreviated, so they're asking fewer questions about labeling. And last but not least, there's a whole bunch of sections that are eliminated. So section E, F, G, H, I, J, K are all eliminated. And those are all specific to the different sections that have performance data and safety testing data. So Q17, question 17 in the special 510K RTA checklist. These are the 3 things they're looking for down here. They're looking for, you must declare all these things. So it'll be one document. It'll say declaration of conformity with design controls. They're going to want you to reference 21 CFR 820.30, which is the design control section. And they want a statement that all the verification and validation activities have been performed by designated individuals and results demonstrate that that you met the criteria that you determined ahead of time. A statement that the manufacturing facility is in compliance with design controls, and a statement, and this statement also has to be signed at the bottom. So whoever's responsible for design, new product development in your company would be presumably the person that would sign this statement. It could also be the management rep as well. For question 19, one of the changes here is a statement that it's intended, that the intended use of the modified device as described hasn't been changed. And I made a note here, changes to the indication with the same intended use are likely to raise new questions of risk that require traditional 510K. For example, if you have a fracture fixation device for orthopedics that is designed for, let's say, the arm, and now you want to use it on the leg, that's a different part of the body. There are different risks, and therefore it's going to be a traditional 510K. Just letting you know now. And it's possible, depending on the risks associated with that part of the body, they may even want to see clinical data. Another reason why it wouldn't be eligible for a special 510K. So, as I said, no client has actually asked me to help them with a special 510K. They think they're really easy. The graph that shows you the people that go beyond 30 days would suggest otherwise, but everybody thinks it's easy. So here's what I would charge if you were asking for a quote. I would charge $1,500 for the PreSub. Why? Because it's shorter. You're only talking about minor modifications, but I would still charge some money for that, and it would take me less time to prepare it because it's going to be shorter. I'm going to be recycling some of the information for your previous 510K, so it should be very easy to put this together, and I'm guessing that it will probably take me about 6 hours to do this. So potentially, it could be done all in the same day if you give me all the documentation that we need. The next thing that is required is the risk analysis. So risk analysis is typically only required in a 510K under 2 circumstances. Number 1, it says it in a special controls guidance document, please identify the following risk controls that you've implemented or how you've addressed the following risks. So that's one common phrase that you'll see in a special controls guidance. The other scenario when you need risk analysis is when you have software. So if you have a software product, they require risk analysis for the software portion of the device. This is the third and very rare exception when you need to provide risk analysis in general for devices that you're submitting a 510K for. It's when you're doing a special 510K. They want you to identify with a risk analysis and re-verification of design changes what is necessary for each of these minor modifications you're making to your device. So that's one of the things they'll be looking at closely. And if you don't identify a risk that the FDA is thinking of, then you might want to think about doing a pre-sub just to make sure you've identified all the risks that the FDA has so you don't have any delays. In number 3, once we've gone through the pre-sub and we've agreed with the FDA, this is on the risk analysis in the verification methods that are going to be used, you would do that testing and then we would submit the 510K. After you've done that testing, I can usually have the 510K in the very next day as soon as the ink is dry on those reports. And typically, I would expect it would take about half as much time for the whole submission. So I'm saying about 14 to 16 hours. So in theory, in 2 days, I could put the whole thing together. And that makes sense because the fastest we've ever done a 510K that was traditional was 3 days. So I got all the information on Friday and submitted it Monday. So yes, it's possible if we could do this in a day or two, probably 2 days, we'd get a special 510K out if we had all the testing information available. Now, you could skip the pre-sub completely if you're very confident, but if you listen to my pre-sub webinar, you'll understand all the reasons why I say that's not a great idea. And I touched on a couple of those points in here, the benefits of a pre-sub. But there's still no difference in the FDA user fees. So even though it's a special 510K, it takes less time for the FDA review and less time for me to prepare. My fees are less, the FDA's fees are the same. Here's software changes. So this is actually borrowed from a slide presentation that I did on software and hardware changes. But one of the things you have to be really careful of is when people think they're doing minor changes and they call it re-engineering of the software or refactoring of the software, be very careful. The things in red are the type of software changes that almost always result in the need for doing a traditional 510K. You change the language, you're not making minor modifications if you're changing the language that your software is written in. You change the overall architecture, now you have to redo your architecture diagram, redo your SRS, redo your risk analysis, redo all your validation. How are you going to summarize that in a short document somebody can review in 30 days? Not going to happen. Because typically these software sections, if you're going to redo the entire architecture or the core algorithm of your product, you could have 500 to 1,000 pages of documentation. That can't be processed in 30 days. So be very careful of these types of changes. They're not special 510K candidates. If you're making clarification of requirements on your software, maybe on the labeling, cosmetic changes to the software, changing some buttons, changing the display, improving usability. If you're not doing these things that are in red and it's a cosmetic change, those are good candidates for special 510Ks. But you should also be able to show the FDA an example. Here's a screen capture of the old version. Here's a screen capture of a new version. We think this is a special 510K. What do you think at the FDA? And you would explain to them maybe in an overall architecture diagram, this is where we're making the change, only this part. And these are the modules or the unit test cases that will be affected. And this is our revalidation plan. So you would actually articulate for the FDA, here's the old unit test cases, here's the new unit test cases, and these are the only ones that we're revalidating. Do you agree with this strategy? Because often they like to see full revalidation of software when you make a change, but oftentimes if you're making minor modifications, you can explain these are the inputs, these are the outputs, and these are the only pieces that really need to be retested. Okay, so we went through that fairly quickly because, once again, this is for special 510Ks, so there isn't a lot to cover. It's a fairly simple process. But people had a lot of questions, and fortunately, the number of questions I thought I could handle in this session, so I'm going to cover each and every question all in this session. So number 1, other than a pre-sub, is there a way to get feedback from the FDA on whether your changes constitute a special versus traditional 510K? Well, if you have a really good relationship with the reviewer and they'll respond to emails or phone, great, you could do it then. Chances are that won't happen. They'll often tell you, sorry, you're going to have to submit a pre-sub to get that answer. I can only answer that unofficially, and I can't do a detailed review of documents you send me. Why? They're on a tight budget and they have to justify all their hours spent, and therefore the only way they can really document that they've helped you is through the pre-sub process. However, if you are doing a 510K submission and you know that you've got some modifications planned down the road and you just couldn't get them in for this first submission, that might be a great time while you're having those interactive dialogues during the substantive review on your first 510K that this new one's coming, and that's when you get that feedback. If you already have your 510K, it's too late to do that. Question number 2, if I'm unable to connect at the scheduled time, will the presentation be available to view at a different day or time? Yes, as I said to everybody will get a copy of the recording. You'll get a link and you can download it from my Dropbox. And this is a free presentation, so please share. Types of special submissions like letter to come. I didn't understand this question. I think the person might have been trying to ask a question about letters to file, but I sent that person an email saying, please clarify and get back to me. Next question. How can you determine whether a change is minor or not? Well, the FDA goes through the trouble of creating these guidance documents to explain what is a minor modification, what is a major modification. Anything that is going to involve multiple functions in the FDA to review your submission, that's not going to be a minor modification. If you're changing the indication for use or the intended use, that's not a minor modification. If you have clinical data, not a minor modification. If you had to do new verification testing that was never required before, instead of repeating existing verification protocols, that might be a good hint this isn't minor, because you've identified a new risk that required a new test. Now, however, if in the past they didn't require that testing and now this is a new requirement, that might be a reason why you have a new test. So it's a question of, are you adding the new verification testing because the standards changed and the FDA implemented a new requirement, or are you implementing this new verification testing because you've identified a new risk that required additional testing? And when you have that, now we have something that needs to be addressed with a traditional 510K. Because the FDA is probably going to want to see your test protocol on the full test report. Going on to question 5. In the past, I've successfully used the guidance on formatting traditional 510K to create a shell for the special 510K. Sections that are not applicable are explained as such, and the risk and performance testing are reduced to cover only the modification. Is there a reason why this would not be acceptable today? I think this person is right on the right track. This is exactly how I would approach it. The only clarification I think it would make here is the FDA doesn't want full test reports, so they want summaries of test reports. And you might ask in the pre-sub, would this be adequate as a summary, and sort of give them an outline of what information you're going to provide, or is there something additional you want there? But they really don't want full test reports here, so it's a good idea to do a pre-sub just to find out, is this going to be acceptable summary of the information? Question 6, will this cover both class 2 and 3 devices? I don't know whether the person meant this presentation or special 510Ks. However, there are only about a dozen device classifications that are class 3 that are eligible for 510Ks. And I think almost all of those require a clinical study. So if you have a class 3 device and you have clinical study requirements and you're making modifications, you're probably talking about a high enough risk device here where the FDA may not feel comfortable with this being a special 510K. I'm not saying it's impossible, but we're really talking about a very small number of companies where this would be applicable. So if you have a class 3 device and you have a 510K for that class 3 device and you're making a modification to it, you're probably in like the top 1% of regulatory affairs professionals already out there. And you probably don't need all my help, but I'd be happy to help you. But class 3 devices with 510Ks, the clinical data, they don't grow on trees. There are very few of them. And so, yes, in theory, it covers it, but I haven't seen one yet. The closest example I could come with is no longer even eligible for 510Ks, and that would have been AEDs. I was working with an AED company, and then the FDA reclassified them as requiring PMAs because all the risks they were seeing in adverse events associated with AEDs. Number 7 question, can you bundle material modifications in a special 510K? I will give an example of one where they made multiple changes, but they were all mechanical changes. They weren't changes to the materials that would affect biocompatibility and changes to mechanical. However, if you were making a change in materials that you were able to, that you already were using that material in another product, and so therefore you didn't need to present any new biocompatibility data, and the only question mark was, would it be mechanically sound, would have still the same mechanical performance, you would do the verification testing over again for the mechanical performance of that device, make sure it's okay, and submit it to the FDA as a special. But if that were my plan, I were going to change the materials, and I was going to affect the mechanical performance, and I was going to redo the verification, I'd want to submit a pre-sub and make sure the FDA was okay with that approach. But I think that's exactly what the example I'm going to present did. Next question. In your message of invitation, you say, okay, so I'm not going to read this whole thing. Everybody can read, but I think what happened here is that in my message of invitation that I sent, I had a typo, and I didn't make some things clear. So special 510Ks are only for minor modifications, not for significant changes. You could use it for multiple modifications, but they'd have to be very minor, and they would all have to be in the same functional area of review by the FDA. So yes, multiple, no significant, yes, minor. And the multiple, even though it's a yes, it has that caveat, they have to be in a single area. Okay, how do you ensure compliance with K97-1? So earlier when I presented the guidance documents at the beginning of the presentation, I indicated that the new device modification guidance document replaced K97, so that's no longer eligible. But yes, you ensure compliance by going through that guidance document and making sure you meet the requirements of it. They have a new flowchart in there that's been updated. And actually, Mary Votter, one of my employees, she's a biomedical engineer, she actually converted that entire flowchart into a form that you fill out, asking all the same questions. And if you fill out that form and use that as a letter to file, it will determine whether you need a 510K or not. So that's how you ensure compliance. You go through that letter to file template and answer that. And I emailed that to everybody that got the slide deck. Number 10 is a repeat question. I don't know if it was the same person or a different person. It was slightly different wording, but I think it's the same question. Number 11 is a pre-review with the FDA advised. Absolutely. Year and a half, 2 years ago, I would have said, you know, if you're a really smart guy like me that's done a bunch of 510Ks, you don't really need a 510K pre-sub, or if there's a guidance document, you don't need it. And I've retracted those words multiple times. I've learned my lesson. I always do a pre-sub unless the client refuses. So yes, do a pre-sub. Would you like to see, they would like to see the special 510K template. As I said, I have not actually done a special 510K for any of my clients since I started this business. My first 510K ever was a special 510K, and I got it in about 17 days. So yeah, I know how to do special 510Ks, and they're relatively easy, but I think the earlier question where the person described their approach, they use their existing 510K template, which I make available to people that take my course. And then I modify that, use it sort of as a shell, and many of the sections become not applicable because there are no changes, or I say in that section, there are no changes from the previous submission. You use the same device as your predicate, so the earlier version of the device as your predicate, and basically all your changes are going to cover one functional area. And instead of presenting test reports, you're going to instead be submitting FDA Form 3654, the Declaration of Conformity, and you're going to summarize the changes that you made rather than providing the test reports. Next on the list, is change of sterilization supplier subject for a special 510K? If you're changing the supplier, no. you would change your registration and listing. So you would list or the supplier would be listing differently. So they would list your device instead of the old supplier listing your device. And you can have more than one sterilization supplier if you wish. But if the process, or it's not the process, but if the method of sterilization changes, so you go from EO to gamma, that introduces new risks. So that may not even be eligible for a special. That might be a traditional 510K. So that would be a good discussion for the FDA and a PreSub. Even though you're going to be using, both would be traditional methods of sterilization, and there are standards available for both, it introduces new risks to the device because each sterilization method affects devices differently and materials differently. So you definitely would need to do more testing and probably do a traditional. For instance, going from gamma to EO, now you have to present EO residuals, and there's some chances that the device will have other contaminants or other problems. So in general, you change your sterilization supplier from the same method to the same method, not a problem. That's a location change and a supplier change. But if you're changing the method of sterilization, that's a problem. If you change the sterilization process, you make a slight tweak, you revalidate. So that would not necessarily even be a 510K. That might be a letter to file. And same thing for the change of supplier, more of a letter to file. What is a minor change? So please give examples. This is where I would love to go through tons of examples for you, but I'm going to give you one, but I'm also going to tell you how to find a whole bunch more, and it'll do a better job than I ever could. But it means you got to do a little bit of homework on your own. So here we go. What you do is you follow the link that I provided at the bottom of the page, okay? And the link at the bottom of the page is in blue, and it gives, so I'm going to move some things around here because it's in the way. So here is the hyperlink for how to access the 510K database. And there are approximately 500 examples in the past year of special 510Ks. So if you go to this database, click on there, and then select special, you'll get over 500 just for the last year because they're listed in reverse chronological order. But that's just going to give you 510K summaries. If you want more information, you can click on redacted FOIs, and you're going to get 122 of those. So these are full 510Ks that have been redacted that you can download that are special 510Ks. That's 122 examples that are giving you more than I ever could legally because I get confidentiality agreements in place. So this is a great source of examples. Everything else would be hypothetical. These are real. You can see how long it took. You can figure out why. You can see what information they presented. You see how they submitted. You see what forms they submitted. You might even see some templates in there. This is how you learn how to do a special 510K. You copy what other people have done before and learn from their mistakes. And these are all really recent ones. So use that resource. Number two, you could also click on third-party reviewed. So I actually clicked on that to see what there was. There are 69 people that have paid money to do third-party reviews. I don't quite understand this because it's going to take at least a couple of weeks for the third-party reviewer to do it and then 30 days for the FDA, so it actually takes you longer. The only thing that makes sense to me is they wanted the feedback from a third-party reviewer, but they didn't want the FDA to see it. But the problem is that everything the third-party reviewer does and sees, even the older versions that are crappy, they have to be submitted along with the final version. So you're not really hiding anything from the FDA. You're just not wasting the FDA's time. And I think you'll find the third-party reviewers aren't going to give you any more assistance consulting-wise than the FDA is. So I think these 69 people wasted some time and money, but there were 69 special 510Ks that went through third-party reviews. I would recommend, if you're going to do a special 510K, just submit it directly to the FDA and save yourself some time and money. But if you want to know how to do it and get some examples, here's 122 of them. Here's the example. So let me click on this. Here's the example I provided. So this was the most recent FOI request. It was from Penumbra. They're a company that makes catheters. Some of them go into the brain for stroke treatment. So this right here is the predicate 510K they use, which they submitted in 2016. And then probably minutes after they issued that 510K, the company submitted another one for changes. And here's the changes, conveniently located right above their table in their 510K summary. Design modifications were made to the subject device, and they did make multiple changes. Number one, reduction of the device marker band length. So the length of the markers, they change, probably to make it easier to print, maybe a different printing method, who knows, maybe just less scrap. And then they changed the dimensions of the device PTFE liner. So they have a Teflon liner they changed. They also changed the reinforcement filaments in the extrusions. So this isn't one change, this is 4 changes. But they're all related to the same device. I suspect reading all 4 of these, they were all mechanical changes, so they only required one functional area of the FDA to look at it. They probably just repeated all their design verification testing for the mechanical performance, like a kink test and the insertion force and the drag force and the ability to navigate a tortuous path. These are common tests that you would do for a catheter, and they probably just repeated those tests using the same test method and same protocols, and it passed with the same acceptance criteria. They summarized that, and they were done. And the other thing that I noticed, it's the bottom of this table that I'm not showing. At the bottom of the table, they extended the shelf life of the product, but they probably said in the summary, we used the exact same method, we used the exact same acceptance criteria, and they were actually probably the same lot of material, but we extended the shelf life of it because we had kept the samples in testing. But on the other hand, maybe they didn't. Maybe what they did is they made these 4 changes and they did all the testing on the new materials. I don't know which, but they would have used the same method, the same acceptance criteria, and just repeated the test. In that, even though that's a different area than functional, because it's shelf life testing, the FDA said, you know, this is okay. I don't know whether they had this cleared up front from the FDA in a PreSub, and the FDA said it was okay. My suspicion is they didn't, because they submitted this probably in the middle of 2016, and they just recently got it cleared in 2017. So it probably took them a little bit of time. The timeline, though, says it was about 30 days. So maybe I'm wrong, and it only took 30 days, but something doesn't quite jive with me, because the date here and where it showed up on the list, I think it might have been a little bit newer 510K, and I'm just not quite understanding why that it appears to have taken so long to show up on the list. Maybe it's just it took that long because of waiting for people to publish redacted 510K. So maybe that's the reason. It has nothing to do with their testing. But here's an example of 4 different mechanical changes they've made to a device, and they got it through a special 510K. And I think it's a fairly well done 510K, so it's a good example to learn from. So if you want to learn how to do a 510K, here's one to take home. More questions. So these are the last 2 questions that were submitted. Does the special 510K replace the traditional already cleared 510K? No, it doesn't. You're not replacing it. It's just a new 510K. So your new 510K, the new special, will list the previous one as the predicate, and both will be in the same product classification. Your old one doesn't disappear. It just both are in the database now. So I think that answers that question. And then the last question here, would you submit a special 510K for a change to a raw material even though the performance of the device doesn't change or introduce any other risks? When you change materials, it's highly unlikely that you don't need a 510K, but they actually have a flowchart for that. So here's what has to happen. Here's the flowchart. This is taken from that new guidance document released on October 25th, 2017. So from the main flowchart, you determine, oh, there's a material change. So then the next question is this an IVD device? If it is, then you're going to go to this chart, but let's assume it's not. Let's say it's a catheter, like the previous example. Is that change in material type, formulation, chemical composition, or material processing? So let's say they changed the Teflon composition. Then the answer would be no, so we go here. I'm sorry, the answer would be yes. We changed the Teflon composition, so we go here. Will the change of the material directly or indirectly contact body tissues or fluids? Oh, yes, it will, because it's Teflon that's on a catheter. So it's going to be easy, probably direct contact. Does the risk assessment identify any newer or increased biocompatibility concerns? Well, no, it's Teflon. It's in the same place it was before, performing the same function as before. So no, it doesn't. Then we go here. Could the change affect performance specifications? Well, yes, it could. If this composition is more stiff or less stiff, we're going to have to do testing. So then you're going to go to another flow chart if that answer is yes. If I said no, that change will not affect it because it's the exact same performance specifications, the same thickness, the same flexibility, yield strength, basically all the same functional. It's really just a model change, or maybe it's just a different supplier, but all the same specs. If that were the case, then it would be a no, and it would be a letter to file. But as soon as I start saying it could affect the performance, I'm going to have to do additional testing and go through additional flowchart. And I might ultimately get to documentation instead of new 510K. But as you can see, you get a bunch of questions here for this type of change. In theory, you're probably going to have this question, this question, this question, this question, and another whole flowchart of questions before you get to documentation. So that's an example of a material change. The answer is possibly yes. Possibly it's documentation, but the roots to that are no, it's not a change in the formulation, and that's not really what you were describing, or it doesn't have any effect on, it doesn't contact tissues and it wouldn't affect performance, or it does potentially affect, have contact, but it doesn't increase or affect the biocompatibility, and it doesn't affect performance, or you go down this route here too. So it's fairly complex to try to get to a no documentation only. Most of the time you end up with material changes being new 510Ks if it's patient contacting material. So that takes me to the end of the presentation. As I said, if you want to set up a private meeting with me, you just use this. It'll get you a 15-minute meeting for free with me. And now I'm going to go to the chat box where I see no questions. So that means I did just such a spectacular job of answering everybody's questions already that nobody has any, or I put you all to sleep. So if you have any questions, please shoot me a little note in the chat box. If not, say goodbye. One person's left. Two people have left. 3 people have left. 4 people have left. Okay, I guess we don't have any more questions today. So if you do have questions that you think of later, please shoot me an email. And thank you very much for the presentation. Talk to you later. Bye.